Welcome to the next video on Power BI. Today we're going to be looking at my compliance dashboard, and I want to talk about a couple other things that we probably already covered in the devices video, which is available on our channel as well. But I made some tweaks to the style, to the functionality, and did some other interesting things in here that you might find useful, so I wanted to quickly point them out. If you haven't watched that video yet, please watch that one and the initial video on how to download, install, launch, and configure your Power BI connector. In short, you click Get Data once you've done everything that you need to do, and then you select OT Base. You input a couple of parameters here to basically just drill down your data. Select your host name and what type of device data or data you want to bring in. Or if you want to just bring all of it in, you can do that as well. For the purposes of these videos, I brought in all of our data. In the previous video, I actually had one before this that I realized I was not actually recording my screen, but I had noticed that our devices and hardware tables were not, there was no relationship between them. So I went ahead and made a relationship between them. And if you've never done this, you shouldn't need to, but if you've never done it, it's a pretty simple process. You want to just find your primary key within both tables, which in the case of all of these tables is going to be your device ID. You're going to click the device's device ID, drag it over to the hardware device ID, and that will create the relationship. And don't forget to make your cross filter direction bidirectional. Apply the change. Now we have a nice bidirectional relationship linking our devices in our hardware table. So let's go back to the devices table. What did I do here? Well, I did a couple of things. I added a location filter down here, and I added a reference location map. These are really interchangeable as far as their functionality. I probably can't imagine a scenario where someone would put both of them on here. What you'd probably do is something more like a location table down here with a device count. That's what I've seen done in the past. But, you know, I have this set up where our current filter is going to filter down to whatever filter we've selected on the page. That's going to reflect in the current filter chart. So if I select, Europe, Germany, Hamburg, it's going to show 49, and it'll show it here on the map. You can also do that same thing by actually drilling down on the zoom, finding that location, and selecting it on this map. And, you know, if you're a global organization like many of our customers are, you're going to have dots all over this map, and you can browse around, you can drill down, you can, zoom in and click on the location to see your devices there. And of course, once you select a filter, it's going to then update the rest of your tables to reflect the percentages of my PLCs and L2 switches and operator panels within this particular location or within this particular location. All of these will update accordingly. One thing that I wanted to point out is, well, what if you don't want something to filter based on a selection? Like, you notice when I select something over here or select something over here, my OT base inventory doesn't change. And that's by design, because that is my total OT base inventory number. And if I'm a CISO looking at this, I want to see that number all the time. I want to know how many we have in there. The only way that data is going to refresh is if somebody does a data refresh on this device's query using it would be under refresh data. That's going to repull the data via the API. And if the device number in OT base inventory has changed, this is going to change. Outside of that, selections I make on this table are not going to any way affect this. And to do that, it's really simple. You just come over here to Format, and you go into Edit Interactions mode. Unfortunately, the way they set this up from Microsoft is a little bit overly complicated, in my opinion. There may be an easier way to do it. If there is, I'm not aware. But essentially, if you don't want a widget to update based on filters, you have to select every table that you don't want it to filter from. And then behind here, you'll see this little I have this locked. Let me unlock my objects really quick. You see this little no sign for none. Well, if I select this one, that's good. It's dark. If I select this one, it's good. It's dark. If I select this one, it's good. If I select this one, it's good. If I select that one, it's good. But I could unmark that. And now when I interact with this particular one, let me go back to my edit interactions. Yeah, so if you see here, you select your location filter. On all of these, this is blacked out, which means it is set to none. That means it's not drilling down. It's not interacting with any of these other tables. I could also do that with any of the other selections here if I wanted to. If I wanted to say on top 10 devices type, well, what if I don't want that to update? Same thing. We would select this little box up here. And then when I click through this filter down here, this box will not interact. It's very intimate relationships based. So you have to do this. If you want to set this to not interact, you have to do it with every one on here, essentially. You have to select the location first, then click no interaction. Select the location filter, then click no interaction. A little bit tedious, but there's probably not a lot of situations where you're going to want that sort of lack of interaction. As you can see for me with all of these widgets on the dashboard, I really only have the one. And that's just because I want to see my OT base inventory as it is at that particular moment. The other current filter on that note will update, and that's by design because I want to see my OT base inventory, but then when I start clicking through filters, I want to see what subset count we're showing. So I have great 57 devices over here. I have 1,894 over here, or 200 over here, or 386 over here. We want that to update. We want that count to reflect. So great. That's, some basic things we did here on the device dashboard. Also, you may have noticed that on the original devices video, we had a column out here called profile with the URL that links you directly to the OT base profile for that particular device. And the more I looked at it, I thought, you're probably not going to want to see the whole URL. There's no point in that. It's wasting a lot of table real estate for a big, long URL link. There's another way we can do that. So what I did was just simply, if you look at this table and you come over to device ID, select the dropdown and do conditional formatting. I selected that as a web URL. And the way I set that up was I left that at field value, applies to values only, and then I went down into devices. I selected our profile from within the device's endpoint. That is what contains the link to that device. And that's what it's going to populate the URL link with. It will populate in each row the link from the profile object within the device's payload. So now we've got a much more simple way of looking at this. I'm no longer wasting real estate putting a big long URL out here. I've got my device IDs already populated in this table, and now they're all hyperlinked as well. So if I come over here to my OT base and log in, it's going to take me directly to that particular profile. If I click on another one, it's going to take me, once I'm logged in, I won't have to do that again. It'll take me directly there. You only have to log in if you're not already logged in. But yeah, so that's, one thing I wanted to show on the devices table that we modified, and I wanted to show you how to do that as well. And here we are on the compliance dashboard. So what I did here was build a basic CISO leveled compliance dashboard. One cool thing I wanted to point out that we didn't really cover in the last video, but you can put all of your pages into one Power BI report. So rather than having a different dashboard for each, I made one Power BI report, and each of my dashboards will exist as a page within this same report. And that makes everything, I think, a lot cleaner. You can bring in your data one time. So I brought in all my data, and now I can use all of that data as I wish to populate all of the various dashboards. And although we won't get into it this video, we may in a subsequent video show you how you can actually set these dashboards up to cross drill through within each one. So you could set it up to say, I want to click USA Charlotte, and that is going to automatically adjust the filter on all of your dashboards to only show the devices in that particular location, whether we're looking at vulnerabilities or compliance or software or devices or obsolescence or whatever. So that may be covered in a different video, but it's a little out of scope for this one. But that is a possibility, and there are a number of different ways we can do that. So we might look at that later. As far as the compliance dashboard, I built a really simple, dashboard here with a couple of big widgets at the top. So again, I don't have a lot of time. I'm senior leadership at the company. I just want to have a quick snapshot of everything I have out there. Okay, I can look at this and I can say, okay, great. We have 5,020 devices in my OT-based inventory. We have 325 of those have some sort of compliance policy applicable to them. And then within those, we have 184 non-compliant devices, right? And then we have down here, policy applies to. What that is if we select a policy, it'll show me how many devices that particular policy applies to. So in this case, 261 devices apply to the Adobe Flash Player, whereas on the outdated OS, we have 315. And remember, one device can be impacted or apply to 5 different policies. Or more. I mean, it could be 100 policies. So that's why you see the numbers kind of adjust as the way they do. But, what we talked about in the other video, we made this one a non-interactive widget and this one a non-interactive, because I want to see the total number with policies, and I want to see the total number of devices. That shouldn't change. That should only change if the actual data coming in from the API changes. So won't cover that more because we've already talked about it, but so yeah, you can see these aren't updating, but everything else is. So let's quickly walk through how this dashboard was built. The first two, the donut chart you've already seen in the devices dashboard. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and go back and check it out, or check back to the beginning of this video where I cover it at least in a little bit of depth, although pretty surface level. But essentially, to create something like this non-compliant versus compliant dashboard, you just create a donut chart, which would involve dragging this donut chart from the visuals pane into your report area, into your visualization area rather. And then you want to select the legend and the count of device ID. So I did status for the legend. That's going to give us our compliant and non-compliant because those are our only two statuses. And then I did the count of device ID from the compliance object there as well. Now, I did count distinct, and I did that because if I change it to count, you're going to see these numbers are kind of wonky, right? Like 325 devices with active policies, but why is it showing something like 588 here? Well, that's because if we're not counting distinct, we're counting the actual rows in the back-end table where we have non-compliant and compliant statuses, and you're going to see a lot of repeat device IDs because, again, one device can have a non-compliant row for this particular policy, but it might also have a non-compliant row for this policy. So you're going to get duplicates, and we don't want that. So you always want to check your count versus count distinct setup here in your data just to make sure everything's lining up and consistent across the board. So that's a really easy one to set up. Over here, we did a clustered bar chart, which is just this. We dragged it into our report pane. In our status, we did legend on the status again. We did status in the legend again to give us our colors, compliant and non-compliant. And then we did on the x-axis the device count, which is counting status. And then we did on the y-axis the policy. So we have our policy, outdated flash. And I'm only seeing 3 because we had a lot of other policies that only had like 1 or 2 devices, and it just didn't look good on a dashboard. You know, you might have a lot more policies and a lot more devices within those policy groups. So you might want to do like a top 10, a top 15, a top 20. I did a top 3 basically because that's what looked best for our particular data set. And to do that, very simple. You just come over here, figure out what you want to filter this down by. If I only want to see 3 here, the top 3, well, okay, I just go, let's look at policy. I drag that into the data fields here, and then I do top 3 by device count of ID. So now I am only showing the top 3 based on how many devices are within that particular policy. And you can check these numbers here by looking at, okay, outdated OS, compliant, 143. Non-compliant, 172. Let's make sure we've got this widget set up correctly. And I can make sure by clicking on it. And we have 172 non-compliant devices. We have 172 non-compliant devices, 172 non-compliant. And then we have 79. I'm not going to count all these. Which brings me to an interesting point. Right now, we're just seeing a visual slice of the non-compliant devices by type, broken down by what it is, virtual machine, server, etc. But what if I want to see the numbers on there? Well, we can do that. We just come over here to this table, this visualization. Let's select it. We're already selected, and then we're going to go to the format visual section, detail labels. Label content right now shows just category. But what if we want to see category and the percent of the total? Well, we could do that by selecting that one. Now we see server 3.63, 45.97, etc. Or we could see just the data value if we wanted. But that doesn't really do us much good because this table is non-compliant by type. So we do want to see the type. So maybe we do category and data value. Great. Now we can see virtual machine and the actual count within there, right? So that's pretty cool. And then we could count up in a scenario like this and see, do we have 172 in here? 79 plus 87 plus 4 plus 1 plus 1. I'm not the strongest in basic math, but it looks like that's 172 as far as I can see. So that's great. And this was just a pie chart visual. Clicked over from here, and I made the legend type, and then the values are the count of status. Okay, and then we added a policy description over here, and that's just another card box with the policy description from the compliance added into it. All right, and then over here, this is what we call a slicer. We did the same thing on the devices table right here. We've already showed that. So we have the slicer built here with the policy acting as the filter so that I can filter the rest of my dashboard. And then we have our report, which we showed in the very first video, how to bring in the data and build a basic report table. And that's what this is down here. We did not link these device IDs on this particular compliance dashboard, but let's go ahead and do that now because we can. So we're going to do device ID dropdown, conditional formatting, web URL, and you might say, but we don't have a profile object in the compliance payload. We don't, and that's okay. We don't need it because we're going to select it from the devices table. We're going to come down to profile, and we're going to say, okay, great. Now we've got all of our device IDs within the compliance table linked just like that. Super simple. Great, and now that we have that, we also put the policy on here so folks can see that if they want to. You know, it's just really all about giving you different ways to present the data, and you are kind of seeing some redundancy here. You're seeing multiple things in multiple different places, and that's okay because they're all coming at you with a little bit of a different angle. You know, we have our devices with active policies here. We have our total non-compliant devices, and you're going to see your total non-compliant devices based on any filter you put on this dashboard, right? You know, but maybe we don't want this widget to update over here. And this is really just a business process question or a best practice. Do you want your non-compliant card to be another static card that doesn't update based on filters? I think there could be an argument could be made for either way. But if you wanted to make it non-interactable, then we could do that. And we showed you how to do that earlier by going to Format, clicking on your Edit Interactions, which will give you all these extra little buttons here. And then you would go to each widget within this dashboard that you don't want to interact with that, select the widget, come over, turn the interaction off, and then do that for each other widget in turn. I'm going to leave it as is because I like to see the red number to always highlight how many non-compliant devices I have within that particular policy. So that's it for the compliance dashboard video. We're going to do a couple more of these. We're going to do one on a vulnerability dashboard, a software dashboard, and an obsolescence dashboard. And then we may do some other ones as well, showing some interesting other things you can do on Power BI, like doing possibly the cross-page drill through to be able to have all of these filters we're selecting propagate across the different pages. You know, we'll see what all can be done with that and show you how to do it. Looking forward to the next one.